Well, as I said, Ratana, for God only knows what reason, Ratana is supposedly the symbolic beginning of the political year. And a bunch of politicians went up to it's sort of like Gloria Vale, to the Rātana Pa near Whanganui on Friday to listen to some brass bands and walk around getting pictures taken for social media. I do not know in the year 2025 what relevance the strange cult of Ratana has got to do with New Zealand politics, but there you go. That's the way we've always done it. We today have the opening of in-person submissions on the contentious, controversial Treaty Principles Bill, and we've already seen the mainstream media. They'll highlight all the people who say it's bad, and they're all experts and judges, and they've all got varsity degrees, despite the fact the vast majority of you don't. And, of course, the bill will get defeated because Luxon won't commit to it and Peters doesn't like Seymour or whatever. But it would seem to me that politics is changing. And the inauguration of Donald Trump and the rhetoric coming from America on politics is having an impact on the rest of the world. We've had a caucus retreat in Palmerston North, of all places, for poor old Labour. Chippy's been out at the barbecue wearing his stubbies and his jandals, and supposedly is going to reconnect with Middle New Zealand and the traditional Labour voters. So what does the year in politics hold, and what wins might blow any good for anyone here? We're joined by a good friend of the platform, political commentator Chris Trotter. Chris, Happy New Year, mate. Nice to talk to you again.
And the same to you and to all your listeners, Sean.
All right. Look, firstly, the Ratana thing. What is with that? Because I just sat there logically thinking about it over the last few days and thought, it's really weird.
It's a relic.
Yeah.
It's a living fossil. What Ratana meant 50 years ago was Labour's really important supporter, ally among Maori New Zealanders. The Ratana Church was in many respects hostile, or certainly not subservient to the Maori aristocrats who had dominated Maori politics since the end of the land wars in the 1860s. And for that reason, there was a kind of synergy, political synergy between Labour and Ratana, who represented the morehu, the scattered ones, the powerless ones, all to do, of course, with the messianic religion that Ratana is, sort of Christian-based. The preferential option for the poor and all that jazz. And so it made a kind of sense. And Labour would make the pilgrimage to Ratana every year to reaffirm and to consolidate the alliance between the two movements. All very sensible, all made perfect sense. And then along came Winston Peters and completely disrupted the Maori seats, took all of them in, when was it?
89?
Yeah, it could have been.
Yeah.
No, it must have been in the 90s.
91, 92, yeah.
Yeah, something like that, mid-90s perhaps. And so suddenly Ratana and Labour weren't an exclusive pairing. Now it was something of a threesome. And since then, the coming of the politicians to Ratana, the pilgrimage to Ratana, racked up, it has to be said, by the news media, who at that time of the year have got
nothing to report on.
Right? So it just became this thing, which apparently everyone has to go to, and if you don't go to it, it's a story. And honestly, it's a relic. of an earlier and a simpler time in New Zealand politics, which, as the political power of Maoridom has grown, and as matters Maori have become more and more the focus of a certain type of journalism, Rātana's importance has ballooned, shall we say, far beyond, I think, its true significance.
All right. Well, we do start every year because of that in Waitangi Day. We always start in New Zealand. We always start the year beating ourselves up over whether we're racist or not, don't we? And even more so this year because today is the opening of oral submissions, in-person submissions on the Treaty Principles Bill. And as I've observed this morning, the Dominion Post, true to form, led off with all the, great and good jurists and intellectuals and people with varsity degrees saying why it's terrible. The very end of the story down the bottom, they had a couple of people who liked it. But it's pretty clear we are going to get, of the, I think, 80 in-person submissions, we're going to have a mainstream media that talks all about the bad bits of the bill, aren't we?
Well, as I just alluded to, a certain type of journalism, Sean, I think your prediction is on the money. I don't think we will hear much in the way of positivity in relation to these hearings at all. And, the drumbeat here is just relentless. A few days ago, Television New Zealand's Maori reporter spent, I think it was the first item on the news, first or second, telling us all how deeply troubling it was that such a terrible array of unqualified Pākehā had been appointed to the Waitangi
Ron
Tribunal.
Mark.
Well, apparently, yeah, and Philip Crump, and of course, Richard
Preble, yeah. Evil.
It's just, where do you go, and what do you do, and how do you deal with this sort of thing, apart from just switching it off? I don't know.
David Seymour has to, and everyone does, the bill's not going to get through because Luxon hasn't got the wit or the political agility to move on this. Winston's not going to compromise on this. So the bill is dead. But in many ways, Seymour, I think, is going to win the argument because the more that our mainstream media, the more that the political and the intellectual establishment rail against it as racist, I think the more middle New Zealand says, whoa, why cut us out of the conversation? Why don't we get a say?
Well, precisely. And, National just baffles me. There's this huge event which has occurred in the United States. This massive disruption of the political force. And it should be riveting the attention of conservative political parties everywhere because there are lessons embedded in Trump's victory, very important lessons.
Political lessons,
not just for the left, but also for the right. And it's as if Trump hasn't even noticed what's been going on.
Luxon hasn't even noticed.
States.
Yeah.
No, sorry.
Well, I thought that State of the Nation speech last week, I think I put out a slightly sarcastic quote. I said 2 days on, how many of you are still pondering the significant observations made in that speech? Well, it was nothing. It was bland. It was, let's say yes to more things and set up a wee bureaucracy. And it seemed to me to entirely miss the zeitgeist of the political times.